Hi everybody, it's Crazy, it's Monday, and it's time for the UPBGE video of the week. Now before I get started, gotta give a shout out to my trusted because you guys rock. To my crazy fam, I love you guys. Okay, now we're up to episode number 64, and last week we left off with Between Poses. That's actually page 50. If you do not have the book, and you're just now tuning in, jump on down there into the descriptions, go ahead and get the book and the files, and come on back. Okay. For all those who do have the book and have been following along, last week we left off with this little guy right here, and as he walks, each one of those lines, we made an array of lines that would go with his pace. Okay? So he will do that for every time he walks. Okay? That's what we left off with last week. Alright, so this week we're going to continue on with on page 50, which is Between Poses. Okay? So far, we have only two poses, the extreme left and the extreme right stride poses. Extreme left and extreme right, okay? Those are two extreme poses right there. After that, we have nothing else, see? Nothing else on that, but just the two poses, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. That's all it's going to keep doing, okay? By default, Blender interpolates the keyframed poses, creating a smooth transition between them, which is what you see here. Okay, that's it right there. Okay, that's the nice little interpolation that it uses. This mathematic interpolation is of no use for the final animation. That leaves us with 20 frames to fill between those extreme poses. From traditional animation literature, you can use two main technique to create those in between frames: straight ahead action and pose to pose. Regardless of the advantages of one or another method, you can learn more about them in the material in the reference section of this chapter. So you can go to the references, it's in the book, okay, and check it out. We should attend to the differences in their workflows. In straight ahead action, you animate frames one by one as you go. In pose to pose, you create sub-extreme poses and fill in the intervals systematically. In both cases, you need to ensure that the feet are not sliding while you pose them. Use the technique presented in the previous section to prevent this. Sliding feet and feet going under the ground are hallmarks of not enough frames and automatic interpolation. Avoid them at all costs. Also, although you can create the animation by posing and keyframing the bones in the 3D view, you might want to tweak them in the graph editor. That can spare you from creating too many frames and using the handlers for fine-tuning your transitions. The fewer frames you have, the easier it is to change your animation. Okay, I'm going to bring it over to this real quick. Switch over. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. Okay, so in this figure you can see the current F curves edited for this walking cycle. Okay, so that's the walking cycle. So if I came back over to here and we change this to the F curve editor, it only shows one. Yeah, that's all of them. Okay, this is just showing our regular walk cycle. Okay, so that's just the key points that it goes through. Okay, so yeah, but this is the one that they're on. Oops, there we go. Okay, so this is with all of them, every single one of them, and I don't see why it doesn't show it in the other one here that I have. It just shows the one. Odd that doesn't sit the way it's supposed to. because usually it shows everything for each pose, each one you have. And if you have the arm, humors, pelvis, ear, right ear, left ear, so on and so forth, that's everything moving on your character. Okay. This is no different from the traditional workflow of animation in Blender. It's not even much different from the animation workflow in other 3D software. From the vast amount of techniques and tools available, I use the following for the cycle. IK bone constraints. Use the IK constrained bones as guides, but remember to keyframe the affected bones as well. Auto key. Automatic keyframe insertion in the timeline editor header, especially for the straight ahead action, will spare you from a lot of manual keyframing. Show and hide handlers, Control H. My personal favorite shortcut in the graph editor. UV grid in the floor to spot feet sliding. Okay. Okay, so in this picture, you can see the final result of our take on this. This file is in Chapter 4, Tutorial Walk 8, Pose to Pose.blend. So what we'll do is, we'll come back over here, go here, okay, go to your file, go to Open. If you haven't gone through these before, you have to make sure you have it in your file book. Okay, because mine is Game Engine Book Files Chapter 4. Okay, you're going to look for the Tutorial Walk 8, which is the Pose to Pose blend, which is this little guy right here. Double click it, and now you see all that stuff. There it is right there, okay? So that's why. Okay, that's everything from his ears to his pelvis to his tail to his hands, you know, the whole 9 yards. Okay? Play it back to see it animated. From here, you can either keep working out of your file, take it from the book file, or merge both together. An action as any other data block in Blender can be imported and saved over different files, as long as the armature bones don't change their names. Okay, so if you want to link it over or import it over, you got to make sure it keeps the same armature bone names. Okay, you want to keep that. All right. Oops. Cancel. I don't want to edit. All right. So now that the animation cycle is done, it's time to bring it from Blender into the game. So I'm going to, yeah. So now we're going to bring this little guy into our game. Alright, so you need to set an action actuator to play the walking action and a motion actuator to make it move accordingly. Okay, so let's start by creating the logic bricks for the armature with rig Momo selected. Okay, so that's this whole rig right here. Okay, it's the whole rig. Actually, let's go out of pose mode. Take it out of pose. Okay, so you got the Momo mesh, and then you've got the Momo, the rig Momo. Follow the steps in order. Okay, and it shows in the figure, in this figure. Let me switch over to it. There you go. This right here is what it should look like. Okay, but we're going to walk through it because it's showing it right here. Okay, so we're going to switch back over to here, and we're going to find our logic editor so we can squish. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do, but we can do that, and then let's change that to the logic editor. You go over here to your logic editor, click it. Okay. Now this right here is your timeline view, and then you've got your 3D view. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to worry about doing the Momo rig. Okay. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add an always sensor. Okay. So let's add an always. Okay. Let's kick that over and scooch that out. And if you hit N on your keyboard and in this area, that will disappear and come back. Okay. Sometimes you'll find it on the left if it's made in, by somebody overseas. Okay, it'll appear on the right if it's US. Okay, so don't freak out. It still does the same thing. It really doesn't matter. Okay. All right, so we got an always center. We're going to do true level triggering. Okay, always set true level triggering if you're going to do an always. All right, and you're going to set the positive pulse to on. That's true level triggering. Okay, add an action actuator. We're going to add an action actuator. Set the action created. Okay, we're going to set the walk. And then the play mode to loop end. We're going to go to the play mode here. We're going to go to loop end. Okay. And then the start and end frames from 1 to 40. So the start frame, you're going to put 1. And the end frame, you're going to put 40. All right, so that's that. You're going to link the actuator, okay, with the always sensor. This will automatically create an AND controller. Sometimes it doesn't. It'll hiccup. If it does, just create an AND controller and just connect them both up. I usually just run it across, but there has been times where I had to fight with it and fight with it and fight with it, and I finally just gave up and just put an AND controller in and just got it done. Okay, you want to see. Let's make sure we got it right here. Okay, link the action actuator with the always sensor. This will automatically create an AND. And say add a motion actuator and leave the values blank for now. Okay, so we're going to add a motion actuator. Where you at? Motion. There it is, motion actuator. And you're going to create and you're going to connect it, okay, to your AND actuator. So both the AND is going to control both of these, okay? Now we've got this one. Now before you minimize these, you want to name them, okay? And they put a walk, okay, that's your walk cycle, animated walk cycle. Okay, so now when you close it, you'll know what that says. Okay, so you know what that action does. It's going to be an animated walk cycle. Okay, your always will be an always, and your and will be an and. Now later on we'll create the motion and see what motion it is. But for right now, we're going to leave it blank, but we're going to name this, okay, a move. M-O-V-E. Okay, and then if we minimize that, you'll see that now you can tell the difference between your walk animation, okay, and your walk movement. Okay. To set the value in the motion actuator, you need to calculate the object speed in Blender and convert it to the game engine. Okay. The calculation is simple and is going to give you the precise speed. If, however, you don't feel like doing math today, let trial and error be your guide. Okay? The speed in Blender units by seconds is equal to 2 strides, 0.23 times 2, divided by the number of cycles per second. The frame range of your animation cycle, which is 40, divided by the Blender frames per second playback value. The game engine uses the same frame rate as Blender to be set in the render panel to 30 frames per second. So, for Momo, the speed we are walking with is 0.35 Blender units per second. Okay, so that's 0.46 divided by 40 divided by 3, or 30, okay? The value to use in the motion actuator is the object speed times the frequency on which the motion actuator is activated. Since we are using an always sensor triggering every logic tick, the frequency is 1 over 60, or 0.017. If you change your game to run at 30 logic ticks per second, the frequency will be doubled. That's 2 over 60, or 0.033. The multiplication of the speed times the frequency is the value you will add to the component of the actuator. The final logic is 0 to negative 0.0059, 0. So on the x-axis, it's going to be 0. On the y, on a negative y, okay, so you're going to hit negative. It's going to be negative 0.0059, okay, respectively. And you're going to do that on location, okay? So basically it's 0.6 is what they're going to put it as, but it's okay, not a problem, because as soon as you click on it, it's just going to say 5.9, okay? But Blender rounds it up right here, but it's still 5.9. It's close enough to 6 that you can actually say 6. Okay, so this is what it should be. 0.1. Well, they said 0.1 on this, but we got 0.006. I guess in the older times it just rounded it up to the next dot. Alright, so in the end, you might want to set the camera to track Momo during the walk. In the sample file, you will see the camera is parented to an empty with an edit object. Okay, so let's scooch out. If we click that, we now have the camera. We don't have anything in it. So, and it says camera pivot. I don't see a camera pivot on this. Yeah, no camera pivot, so I don't see an empty. Let's see, in the end, you might want to set the camera. You will see the camera is parented to an empty with an edit object. So I don't see it. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, here's the empty. Okay, that's the camera pivot. They don't have anything on it, but we're going to add those in. Okay, so you're going to put in an always. Okay, true level triggering as always. Okay, and then you're going to put in an edit object. Edit object is going to be track 2. Okay, we're going to track to Momo rig. Or, I'm sorry, rig Momo. The rig Momo right there. And right now it's set to to 0 with 3D. So we're all set and good on that. And then that one is act. So we're going to name it act. So there we go. And let's see how many minutes we got here. Yeah, we got a little bit of time. It's going to wind up being 20 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and end it on that since we got it to this. You can find it in the Chapter 4 Tutorial Walk 9 Playtime Blend. But make sure you always put your AND in there, your AND controller, okay? So that way it works, all right? So that's what we got for right now. Next week, we'll go to idle animation. Let me kick it over here, and then let's switch to, take that off. There we go. Nope. That one. There we go. Okay, so we're going to end with idle animation. We're going to start that next week. Okay? So now you learn how to do a little bit more with doing it in the game engine. Okay? Doing it in the game engine and doing it in Blender are a little bit different, but they're about the same because you're only running the animation. You're just making the animation run, instead of, working through that. Just doing an animation cycle, and then you have to, render it out. You're actually rendering it to the screen, and you're making it do it on screen. So, until next week, we'll see you then.